Okay, Sandy, it's just you and me. My name is Brad Kadrich. I don't know if she introduced me. I'm the managing editor of the magazine. So this is going to be quick and painless, and we'll go on. I wanted to start. I wanted to let you do a little bragging about the city. We just had the draft. We just had the Grand Prix. Detroit has obviously experienced, and more than just recently, a resurgence. Why do you think that is? What is it about the city that is driving the resurgence?
Well, there's been a lot of factors that have driven, what we've seen in Detroit, and I would say particularly downtown Detroit, but across the neighborhoods as well too. One is really solid governmental leadership. I mean, there's really no substitute for adult supervision at the top levels. The fact that we have a mayor that is very action oriented, very results oriented, really focused on, not the optics and the fluff stuff, but really, doing the big things that are necessary to make sure that people's lives get better, that neighborhoods get better, that business opportunities get better. That is huge. And he has, been surrounded, frankly, with an extraordinary level of support from the corporate community, which is obviously where an organization like ours, but many others would come in, the philanthropic community. The Detroit region has one of the most lush and active philanthropic communities in the country, second only to maybe a place like San Francisco or New York City. So it's very, very strong. And then, of course, support from the other elected officials, the other governmental officials from across the state. We've had two governors in a row that have been very supportive of the positive trajectory in Detroit. We've seen a lot more collaboration across the Detroit region, especially with the county executives. And we've seen a lot more kind of unified action in Lansing with legislators from all parts of the state and of both parties. So, it's certainly taken a village, but fortunately, we've had some really great village elders.
Yeah. We just did a story that tourism is such a big part of Michigan's economy. And we just had the draft, we just had the Grand Prix, the NCAA is coming back. How can Detroit take advantage of that, of the state's popularity as a destination spot, to increase its visibility and its viability, really, for national and even international business?
Well, that is already very much in progress. In fact, if you talk to Claude Molinari over at the, Visit Detroit shop, they've got more prospects and more business than they can shake a stick at right now. They're really only limited by our capacity at this point, capacity for meeting space, capacity for hotel rooms. Both those things are getting better, by the way, but that's really the only limitation that they have. They are now working on, potential international or national conferences that would take place in Detroit a decade out.
Um, You serve on a variety of boards, Automotive Hall of Fame, Detroit Economic Club. You contribute to the Harvard Business School. Um, all of that, with all of that knowledge and all of that involvement, what is your forecast for the next year or so economically? And is there anything that businesses should be aware of that's coming up in the next year or so?
Well, the big thing that everyone is watching is interest rates. That could drive some different decision making in C-suites across the country. I just finished 7 years on the Federal Reserve Bank board, and frankly, I miss it dearly because it was such a great source of intel that I was able to share with my colleagues and my members. But the Fed just met earlier this week. They are,
Right.
not surprisingly, they are keeping interest rates steady. And my guess, and this is just a guess, that I would be really surprised if they did more than one rate cut before the fall. And I wouldn't bet a steak dinner on it. I might bet a hamburger at McDonald's. The economy is still doing well. We're seeing some really solid economic growth numbers, GDP growth numbers. We're seeing, still, a very lush labor market. And most importantly, we are still seeing strong consumer spending. So consumers are cranky, they're unhappy, they don't like the state of the economy, but they're still spending. Basically, consumers have the attitude that, well, the general economy is terrible, but my economy is doing great. So there's a really
Right.
big disconnect there.
There is a disconnect there. Why do you think collectively the economy is not getting the credit it deserves? I mean, it's like the strongest economy in the world, but people are still cranky.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We've been talking about that now for over a year and a half because we do a lot of polling. Our polling partner is the Glenn Gariff Group, Richard Schuba. And we've been polling on this issue now for, gosh, over 2 years now. And so there's a couple issues. One, I mean, yes, the United States right now is frankly by far the strongest industrialized economy in the world. But, Americans don't live in other countries. So, all
Right.
the only thing they have to compare it to is here at home. So the fact that we're doing better than the rest of the world really doesn't matter to them. That kind of makes sense. The other issue is kind of political perspective. It used to be that, your view of the sitting president was based on how the economy was doing, kind of the hard numbers, unemployment rate, GDP growth, the misery index, if you remember that from the 1970s,
I do.
inflation rate.
It's the economy stupid. I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah. The inflation rate plus the unemployment rate equaled the misery index. But now your view of the economy is based on your view of the president. So if you're a Democrat-leaning voter and you're inclined to like, President Biden, your view of the economy is much stronger. You give it much higher marks than if you're not a supporter of President Biden's. So we're seeing kind of the tail wag the dog here. And then finally, you have to recognize that inflation, the inflation that we had in 2022 that reached up to 9% at one point in time has been a huge driver for dissatisfaction with people. Even though wages have been rising, people don't feel it. They see that the price of eggs went up, price of bacon went up, it never went down.
Yeah. So let's get back to that question. After their meeting the other day, the Fed did, again, as they've been doing for a few months now, hint that the next cut could come in September. A lot of economists seem to think that's what's going to happen, that they're going to cut their rates in September. If they do, what will that mean for Detroit?
Yeah. So one, it would be very good news for Detroit. So I'm going to say it's going to be good news for Detroit. And here's why I say it's going to be good news. One, if you lower the cost of capital, then that just makes, that many more projects. I don't care what they are, investment projects, CapEx projects, that much more viable. So, so companies that are sitting is like, geez, do I want to finance this, that, or the other thing? Some CapEx expenditure, or do I want to build a new plant or, this, that, or the other thing? It makes it that much more likely that they'll say yes. And that obviously, drives the economy. For our companies that, sell big, heavy things that are generally financed over time, such like an automobile,
Right.
that makes the price of automobiles cheaper. And then that's good news for our economy. So listen, I mean, if you get a quarter point cut, in interest rates, it's not going to have a transformative impact, but I think it'll send the message that, okay, we really have achieved a soft landing. If the Fed is confident enough that we can start cutting interest rates, our company can be more confident in the trajectory of our economy.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that, it's already happening, that businesses are kind of lining up to come here. Talk a little bit about your role and the chamber's role in making Detroit a destination.
Yeah, so one of our primary roles as a business association, and we're the largest in the state, is to make sure that the policy environment across the state is conducive to our companies staying here, our companies being able to access the right talent, and an environment in which other companies will want to come to locate here. So now our job isn't to actually go out and recruit the other companies. We help with that, but there's a partner organization, the Detroit Regional Partnership, that was carved out from the chamber about 6 years ago. So they're the ones kind of hitting the planes, hitting the phones, bringing people in. But our job is to make sure that the environment here is one where businesses that are located in either Taiwan or Texas say, oh, okay, this is a good environment. I've got access to talent. I know what my policy environment is going to be, the needs that I have. I know that government's going to be responsive. I know organizations like, the Detroit Regional Chamber or the DEGC or whoever it is going to be responsive to my needs once I get to Michigan.
Yeah. There are people who probably don't know that Detroit has become this big attraction. What are some of the, I don't know, two or three biggest investments slash developments that have happened in Detroit in the last couple of years?
Yeah. Well, first, just very, very, very briefly, I would say that, the national narrative or the international narrative on Detroit has changed dramatically in the last decade. I mean, we are now really a city that keeps popping up as one of the most interesting, one of the best places to visit, one of the most dynamic, so that has been a real sea change. I mean, you really no longer, get on a plane and people, oh, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Detroit. And, people don't say, oh, it's too bad, I'm so sorry. People say, wow, I hear cool things are
Yeah,
going on there. But the big projects, I mean, certainly, you got to put at the top of the list, Dan Gilbert's renaissance of the Hudson site. That's going to be a spectacular building with GM being the anchor tenant there. You got to put Michigan Central Station, driven by Bill Ford and Ford Motor Company. That's going to be a huge innovation hub. You've got to add, what Bob Riney at Henry Ford Health is doing with Kevin Gustowitz at MSU and Arn Tellem over at the Pistons, with their $3.5 billion health innovation center on Grand Boulevard. That's going to be, transformative. University of Michigan's Innovation Center that they're partnering with the Illiches and related companies. That's going to be, right there, kind of on the right by Beacon Park. These are big, fundamental, game-changing investments that are occurring literally all within, a few miles of each other. That's going to give Detroit something that we've never had before.
yeah. So what are the most pertinent investment opportunities? Businesses that are considering coming to Michigan or primarily to Detroit, are there certain industries that are more conducive, Detroit is more conducive for? What advice would you give, I'm sure you give it a lot, do you give businesses that are considering coming here?
Yeah, so certainly, I mean, and I think that's a really smart question, Brad, in the sense that you don't want to be all things to all people. That just never that just never works out, right?
Right.
So, but certainly, we've got a real competitive edge in a handful of areas. So one is anything around the engineering and mobility sciences. We are one of the top per capita places on the planet for engineering. And if you relate that to next generation mobility, we are home, Michigan is home to 96 of the top 100 automotive slash mobility suppliers, not to mention that all the major, OEMs are located here. And if you want to be providing technology to these companies, to put in, these four-wheeled wonders that we call automobiles, there's really no better place than the Detroit region or Michigan as a whole. Health sciences. Our university research corridor, MSU, Wayne State, University of Michigan, has, I think it's the third largest share of federal research grants around health and medicine in the country. Not to mention, we've got, world-class healthcare institutions with these world-class university research, health research, in MSU, U of M, and Wayne State. So that is a huge, huge area for us. And areas like fintech, because we are growing our technology and our innovation and our skills in those areas very, very strongly. And you can see that in the success of, Dan Gilbert's companies.
Right, right. Um, that's nice to hear, considering most people, when they think of Detroit, think of the auto industry, and probably nobody outside your business circle thinks of Detroit as a place for fintech. So it's great that we're expanding Detroit's image like that. But it is still primarily an automotive town. From your perspective, what is happening in automotive industry, both domestically and globally? For instance, with electric vehicles, there's been a lot of chaos in that sphere. Do you have any insight as to what's going on, and whether that kind of chaos is going to level off?
Yeah, so a hugely important issue, Brad, and I'm really glad you raised it. So we also run the statewide Automotive Industry Cluster Association, MISHAUTO, and so we're constantly looking at the issues around autonomous vehicle transition, electrification transition, trends in the industry. So, first of all, there's no doubt that the growth in EV demand, certainly in North America, but globally as well too, has slowed compared to kind of the frenzy that was taking place in 2021, 2022, but starting in 2023, that really started to retard. That doesn't mean that we're not selling more EVs, right? I mean, we had a frenzy when really the only kind of EVs that were sold were pretty expensive ones. Things like, the Audi e-tron or the Jaguar I-Pace. Yeah, you had a Chevy Bolt here and there, but, not really many affordable ones. That market has changed dramatically now. You're seeing just a plethora of different options available. Secondly, EVs have really become a political issue, and that's really, really unfortunate, because it's pretty clear that the industrialized world is moving to electrification. I don't know if it's going to take 15 years or 25 years, but at some point in certainly our lifetimes, a majority of vehicles, personal vehicles sold in the industrialized world will be EVs, just full
Yeah.
stop. And we can either choose to be part of that revolution or not. And if we're not part of that revolution, and our companies don't compete in that space, we could be left holding the bag. And that's just not a good place to be. I didn't live here in the 1970s, but, there were a lot of people in the 1970s that kind of ignored the threat from Japanese companies, ignored the threat around quality or around fuel efficiency. And frankly, I think it's safe to say that, our auto industry never really recovered from some of those fundamental fumbles in the 1970s. So let's not make the same mistake again.
Yeah. Politically, we've obviously got an election coming up for president, and also the state houses. What can the Detroit expect economically, depending on how the election goes? Is it going to make a difference who gets elected, or do you guys still just go about your business?
Yeah, well, we certainly don't opine on the presidential race. To the best of
Right.
my knowledge, the chamber never has. There's no value in that. But, certainly, when it comes to, the city of Detroit, the amount of support that the city has received from, from the recent Democratic administrations, the Obama administration, and then, the Biden administration, has been substantial. In fact, President Biden when he was vice president, was probably Detroit's biggest booster and champion. So that if there's a switch, if former President Trump becomes current President Trump again, I think you can expect some less support directly to the city. I think the issue of electrification that you brought up just a few minutes ago, is America going to continue to push to be competitive in this globally growing space around electrification? I think, President Trump has, despite his friendship with Elon Musk, which is a little odd. But President Trump has really indicated that that's something he wants to back away from. I think that'd be unfortunate from a business standpoint. I'm not looking at it from an environmental standpoint. I'm looking at it from a pure business standpoint.
Right.
And I think that'd be unfortunate. But if we have a return to Trump, Trump did some massive tax cuts that, while they, blew a huge hole in the deficit, it really energized business. So, you got to take the good with the bad with whoever
Sure.
elected.
Sure. And I think, speaking of opining, I think we've gotten really bad at that, at taking the good with the bad. So you really have two hats on. You're a community leader, you're driving the city forward, and then you're the leader of your team. Talk a little bit about yourself. Talk about, reflect on everything that Detroit Chamber has accomplished, and maybe a couple of things that you are the most proud of.
Yeah, so I appreciate the team leader thing. I've always taken that role really, really seriously, and I've been in this job now well over a decade, and keeping yourself fresh I think is hugely important. So actually about a year ago, I embarked on an effort with a professional executive coach to come in to kind of coach our entire organization, including me, and really being able to take a look at ourselves in a third party way, to really kind of pressure test. Yeah, we've got a great reputation, but how are we really functioning? And so it's basically kind of kicking over some rocks, and that has been a terrific experience. Because the reputation of the organization, and it's not because of me, it's because I'm surrounded by just this terrific team of people. There's 92 of us that are bouncing around here, all working on different things. But between the work that we've been able to do around some of the big legislative pushes, including the Gordie Howe Bridge, that has our fingerprints all over it. Took a long time to get there. Things like starting up Mich Auto. I mean, we did not have a statewide automotive association in Michigan. Committed to the economic development of the auto industry in our.
I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
How
Well,
much
we all
depend
were,
on
right?
it.
Yeah. But that has been hugely successful. I'm really proud of the team in terms of how they've handled and grown the Mackinac Policy Conference, and kind of lifted the veil, but just vastly improved the programming of that. So there's just a tremendous amount to be proud of. Education and talent is now our largest portfolio, and so we do more around that than we do any other topic.
Yeah. You talk about your leadership, and your focus on that. What advice would you give to, you get kids that are, young people that are trying to be leaders? What advice would you give future leaders?
So, the one thing I tell people is that, there's different ways to get where you want to go. One of the questions you need to ask yourself is the pathway to get where you want to go something you're willing to take? I mean, like, for example, when I was much younger, I said, God, I'd love to be a United States senator. I grew up working for one. I was 20 years old when I started working for one. But then I realized, like, going, God, the pathway to get that job, to run for office and all that it takes, and the pathway is like going, I don't think I'm going to enjoy that. I just don't think I'm going to like that. So the end path might have been great. The other thing I tell people is perspective. Get different perspectives in life, and in your career. One of the things that I'm most thankful for me in my background, my career is that, I've worked in different parts of the country. I've worked for different kinds of organizations. I've worked for large organizations, small organizations, and just having that perspective of being in different places, working for different people with different organizations, and even different parts of the country where the culture is different. To me, it's just of tremendous value to be able to walk into any situation, either in my day job or any other situation, and bring lots of different perspectives to it. It's not just one organization or one city, or one kind of culture. I'm bringing this kind of patina of different cultures and different experiences, and to me, that's the greatest gift I've given myself.
Yeah. What about a book? Is there a book you recommend for other leaders? Do you recommend anything?
Yeah, I have the world's most boring book reading. I do political books and political biographies. I mean, that's pretty much all I that's pretty much all I do. In fact, I just was just at an event in College Station, Texas, and celebrating the 100th birthday of George Herbert Walker Bush.
Right.
And the author John Meacham, who I know, who's been one of our speakers at Mackinac, just wrote another book about George Herbert Walker Bush called Character Above All. So I'm just getting ready to crack that as we now enter the August summer reading season.
Yeah. So you've got friends or people coming to town. What businesses do you recommend they go visit? What do you want them to see?
Oh, well, it certainly kind of depends on what their interests are. We just had family in town earlier this summer, and just seeing what's going on downtown. I love taking people to the riverfront. That is such a spectacular thing. The Henry Ford Museum out in Dearborn. People love that. We love taking people there. So it just kind of depends. We've got some of our little favorite restaurants. Like I love taking people to El Barzone, out Michigan Avenue, and then you make that left turn onto Junction.
Yep.
And people are always surprised, to see that there's just a really fabulous restaurant there. So there's just so many things. It really just kind of depends on what people are doing. We've taken people up to Mackinac Island. People who aren't from here just find that an incredibly unique experience.
Yeah. Okay, American or national Coney Island?
Oh God,
I'm not gonna include this part in this
yeah,
story.
no, I should. I'm not a hot dog guy. I couldn't tell you to save your life, to save my life. Which one's better? Now, if you want to ask me about, townhouse versus park, yeah, I'll give you an off the record answer there. But when it comes to hot dogs, not so much.
Um, that's all I need for the story. I did want to ask you though, and we'll cut this part out. What senator did you work for?
Oh yeah, it's all in my bio. I worked for U.S. Senator Bob Packwood. He was a Republican out of Oregon, which is where I grew
Yeah.
up. And so I worked for him off and on for Lord knows a whole bunch of years. I'm still close to him. In fact, we're having dinner together in a couple of weeks.
Did you ever run for office?
Nope, never did.
Why not? You said you wanted to. You said you would have liked to have done that. What kept you from doing
Well,
it?
because I wasn't interested in the pathway. I mean, yeah, I wanted to be United States Senator, but I didn't want to be in the state house. I didn't, I and also I was bouncing back and forth between Portland and Washington, D.C. I really didn't have a political base. I really didn't have a political home.
Yeah,
Uh, and you've got to have a political home. You need a
sure.
constituency that knows you. And since I spent most of my career in Washington, D.C., you obviously you can't run for Congress from Washington, D.C. So
Yeah, I wouldn't have had the political stomach for it personally, but Sandy, I really appreciate the time. It was great chatting with you. As I said, I'll be sitting down to write this weekend, and it'll go on our July-August edition, which goes live online, I think the second week of August. But we will make sure you get a link to the story and the video. So
that sounds great. Well, I appreciate your time. You had great questions, and I'm delighted to make your list of people worthy of having a conversation.
I appreciate the time. You have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, Sandy.
Be
Bye-bye.
well.
You too. Bye.